You're about to discover something that should have remained hidden. Something so deep and mysterious that it has been kept from the public eye for decades. It's not about a new scientific theory or a mystical explanation of the universe. It's not about a secret formula or an abstract concept. It's about you. The power you already carry within you, something you may not have realized yet, but which you are about to understand. The truth is that everything you live, the experiences you have, the choices you make, everything you believe to be the reality of the physical world is actually a creation of your mind. Not just tangible reality, but everything you perceive as real. This secret has often been kept under wraps, but today it has come to light. Stephen Hawking, one of the greatest physicists of all time, didn't just talk about black holes, the origin of the universe, or string theory. He also talked about the soul, something that throughout his life he had never fully revealed. But in his later years, he began to see death and the soul in a different way. He began to realize that just as the universe is infinite and constantly expanding, the soul is also an infinite creative force capable of manifesting its own reality, both while alive and after death. When we think of Hawking, we often associate his name with physics and the cosmos. But the truth is that on his journey, he discovered that the human soul is an extension of the universe itself. Throughout his deepest reflections, Hawking came to the conclusion that the human imagination is the key to creating our own reality. Not just physical reality, but everything we experience as spiritual beings. Death is not an end. It is just a transition, a continuation of creation. You may be wondering, what does this have to do with the soul and life after death? Hawking began to realize that death does not erase the soul. On the contrary, it frees it to create an even more fluid, purer, and more direct reality. The soul, when freed from the physical body, does not dissolve into nothingness, but becomes a part of the cosmos in constant transformation. And the imagination that has been cultivated throughout life continues to shape the soul's reality on the spiritual plane. Death is not an end, but a continuation of creation. What you create while you are alive is what you will create after you are free from the body. This is what Hawking finally began to understand. He knew that somehow the soul doesn't die with the body. It continues to create its reality with the same creative force it possessed while in the physical body, but now on a plane where physical laws don't apply in the same way. Imagination continues to shape reality, but without the limitations of space and time. And here is the revealing truth: what you create in life, you continue to create after death. The soul does not meet a fixed or predetermined destiny. It encounters what it has always imagined and believed to be true about itself, whether in life or beyond death. The soul's creative power does not disappear with the body, but expands, and its spiritual reality will be a direct reflection of what it believed was possible while incarnate. If you still have doubts about what this means, understand that there is no separation between life and death. Both are a continuation of the soul's creation. The soul creates what it imagines, and when it dies, it continues to create in the afterlife, with the same intensity, the same strength, and with more freedom. Death is only a transition of form, but the soul's creation never ends. As we reflect on what happens to the soul after death, the most profound revelation that Stephen Hawking brought to light was the realization that creation is not a one-off event, it is continuous. Death, contrary to what many people think, does not stop the soul's creation, but expands it into new dimensions. Throughout his life, Hawking challenged many established ideas about the physical universe, but in his final reflections, he went beyond science. He glimpsed something greater. The soul, as part of the infinite universe, is eternally creative. Have you ever stopped to think that the spiritual reality you experience after death is not something imposed on you? It's not a fixed destiny or a divine judgment, but a continuation of everything you believe to be true during your life. What you imagine, what you create in your mind while you are alive, is exactly what you will continue to create after death. Death then becomes a transition, not to the end, but to a new state of creation. Death is not the end of creation, but only a change in the form of manifestation. For Hawking, the idea that the soul is lost or dissolves after death is an illusion. The soul does not cease to be creative with death. It continues to create, but now in an even more fluid and expanded form, free from the physical limitations of the body. This spiritual freedom is what allows the soul to shape spiritual reality with the same creative power it possessed while alive. Imagine the soul now free from the physical body being able to create, without the limitations that time and space impose. Imagine a spiritual universe where there are no more barriers, where the power of the imagination becomes limitless. After death, the soul connects directly with the creative universe, creating with the same intensity but without the restrictions of the body. This creative freedom of the soul in the afterlife is not just a theory. It is a tangible reality for those who understand the role of imagination in creating their own spiritual journey. Hawking believed that the soul, when it dies, continues to manifest reality based on everything it imagines and believes to be true. Imagination is the fundamental, creative force, and there is nothing death can do to extinguish that force. But what happens when the soul creates its spiritual reality? What happens when it begins to manifest a new kind of existence more in line with its divine essence? For Hawking, this is just an expansion of being. The soul is not in a state of emptiness or loss. It expands into a purer reality more connected to the creative flow of the universe, where creation becomes more immediate and more powerful. At death, the soul frees itself to create instantly without the limitations of a physical body. Creation continues, but now it is purer, more aligned with the divine. Hawking believed that by connecting with the creative universe, the soul not only continues its creation continuously, but it can also transform its perception of itself. The process of spiritual evolution is never-ending, because the soul, when it dies, does not reach an end or a fixed destination. It transforms itself, but the journey of creation never ends. The spiritual universe that the soul creates after death is not determined by a single choice or thought, but by the soul's continuous vibration, by the vibrational frequency it maintains while living. You create your spiritual reality according to the frequency with which you imagine and connect with divine creation. This understanding of continuous evolution and creative transformation is what sets Hawking's perspective on death apart. For him, death is not the end of the soul, but a continuation of the creative process, where the soul, on freeing itself from the physical body, begins to create its spiritual reality with more freedom and connection to the divine. The soul doesn't die. It just transforms itself and continues to create in a purer way. At death, the soul connects to the creative universe where the laws of physics and the limitations of time and space don't apply in the same way. When the soul is freed from the physical body, it not only connects to a spiritual reality, but it expands to a plane where time and space no longer have the same power. Creation continues, but now in an immediate way, more connected to the divine essence that has always been part of it. For Stephen Hawking, death is not the end of the soul's journey. On the contrary, it is a transition to a purer form of manifestation, where the soul not only creates its reality, but also becomes the very essence of the universe that surrounds it. Hawking believed that the soul, when freed from the limitations of the body, continues to create according to the vibrational frequency it carries. Just as he described the physical universe as an interconnected network of laws and energies, the soul is also connected to a spiritual network that allows it to manifest its reality continuously. The soul is never lost, it is transformed. And this transformation is not an end, but a creative rebirth where everything it has imagined and believed in is manifested on the spiritual plane. This means that after death, the soul doesn't go to a fixed place, but to a space where creation continues without the limitations that the physical body imposes. The soul continues to create its spiritual reality but in a way that is freer, purer, and more connected to the whole. Death is the transition to a state where the soul's imagination is no longer restricted, where it can instantly create the reality it wishes to experience. Time as we know it no longer applies, and the soul begins to realize that there is no separation between the physical and the spiritual, but that everything is an extension of the same creative energy. At death, the soul doesn't lose its creative capacity. It frees itself to create without the limitations of the physical body. What you create while alive is what you will create after death. But creation is not linear. It is expansive. You begin to create on a new plane more connected to the divine. This transition of the soul to the spiritual plane also involves a transformation of consciousness. If the soul in life fed on thoughts of fear, guilt, or separation, it will create a spiritual reality that reflects these beliefs. But if the soul has remained in a state of love, light, and unity, it will create a more enlightened and expansive reality. The soul is not an isolated entity. It is an extension of the universe connected to the divine and the creation of all things. What you believe about yourself and the universe will be reflected in what you create after death. Hawking believed that the mental imprint the soul leaves while it is alive is what determines its spiritual reality after death. But he also knew that just as the soul creates its reality, while alive, it has the power to transform that reality on the spiritual plane. Creation never ends. It continues. The soul, even after death, can reimagine its experience, can create new dimensions of existence, new ways of being. Everything you imagine is real, whether in the body or in the afterlife. This power of infinite transformation is what makes the soul's spiritual journey a constantly evolving experience. The soul is not condemned to a single cycle of existence. It creates, it transforms, it evolves. There is no end, only continuous expansion. For Hawking, this is the great truth of the universe. Creation is eternal. It doesn't matter where the soul is, it will always have the ability to create and transform its spiritual reality based on the imprint it left in life. You are not bound by what was created in the past. What you imagine can be changed. The soul has the capacity to reinvent itself, to create new realities, and when it connects with the divine source, its creation is limitless. Now imagine that the soul, by freeing itself from the limitations of the physical body, enters a new realm where there is no longer any separation between it and divine creation. For Stephen Hawking, the greatest mystery of the universe has always been the flow of creative energy that connects everything that exists. This flow, which can be seen in the laws of physics and the behavior of the cosmos, is not exclusive to matter, but extends to the soul and its ability to create, manifest, and evolve. When it dies, the soul does not dissipate, but connects even more deeply to universal creation, becoming a direct extension of the divine, creating new experiences on the spiritual plane. When the soul releases itself from the body, it connects to something greater, to a universal creative energy. What you call God or the universe is actually this creative force that is within all of us. When you die, you merge with that energy. Hawking believed that the soul, like the physical universe, is always moving and expanding. This connection with the divine is not just metaphorical, but real and concrete. The soul does not go to a fixed place, but merges with creation, flowing and creating according to its own perception and imagination, which now free from physical form becomes purer and more immediate. Death does not mean the end, but transformation. The soul does not go to the afterlife as a lost being. It connects directly to the creative universe where the laws of physics don't apply in the same way. The soul, now free, becomes an extension of the divine flow. After death, what happens to the soul is not predetermined but a continuation of creation. The soul that connects with the divine is not limited to the idea of a static existence or a fixed spiritual reality. It continues to evolve and create in new forms, always connected to the universal creative energy. You never stop creating. And after death, you continue to create, but now without the limitations of the physical body. Death is not a punishment, but a transition to a purer form of manifestation, more connected to the divine. This is the power of the divine connection that Hawking began to understand. When the soul is freed from the physical body, it does not lose its ability to create. It expands into a reality where the laws of time and space don't apply in the same way. In this new state, the soul creates instantly without the limitations of matter. Death doesn't erase the soul. It only frees it to create more freely, more intensely, more connected to the divine. When it dies, the soul is not separated from the divine flow of creation. It is part of that flow, and this makes it capable of manifesting any reality it desires. The soul, by connecting with the divine, becomes one with creation. What you want to create in the beyond, you create instantly. Hawking knew that if the soul is connected to the universal creative flow, it is no longer restricted by the limited vision of the physical world. It becomes a part of the whole, and its imagination, now more expansive, becomes the fuel for the creation of new spiritual realities. What the soul imagines while in the body, it continues to manifest after death, but now with the freedom to create, without boundaries. At death, the soul is no longer limited by the laws of physics. It becomes one with the creative energy of the universe. Creation never ends, it only continues. This concept of the continuity of creation after death is what distinguishes Hawking's vision of spiritual life. He believed that rather than a final journey or a separation of the soul, death is a transition to a new phase of creation where the soul continues to manifest its reality, but now in a purer and more divine form. Death is just a transition to unlimited creation. The soul, now free, becomes an extension of the universe, creating infinite possibilities in harmony with the divine. As the soul connects with the divine and frees itself from physical limitations, it enters a phase of infinite expansion where creative power is no longer restricted. For Stephen Hawking, the universe is a dynamic system constantly evolving, and the human soul is no different. It too is constantly evolving, always in motion, always in creation. What Hawking began to understand in the last stages of his life was that death does not interrupt this process of evolution, but only transforms it and expands it into a new dimension of being. Hawking's concept of spiritual evolution goes beyond the traditional understanding of the soul. He saw the soul not as something fixed or stagnant, but as a dynamic field of creation, where everything we believe, imagine, and desire shapes our spiritual experience. The soul is not a fixed entity. It is a creative force that is always expanding, adapting, and creating new forms of existence, he said. The idea that spiritual evolution does not end with death is fundamental to understanding the soul's creative destiny. For Hawking, the soul is not simply locked into a final state of existence, but is in constant flux, creating new experiences and new realities, always expanding, always adapting to the creative energy of the universe. Death does not put an end to the creative process. It releases it to a new level of creation. The soul continues to evolve and create infinitely. Hawking believed that the soul has the ability to create according to its deepest beliefs, but also has the ability to evolve those beliefs. Spiritual reality, then, is not something predetermined, but a continuous manifestation of the soul, where it creates its reality according to its own vision and internal evolution. Death is not the end of spiritual evolution. It is a transition to a purer form of creation where the soul can manifest its reality more immediately and in line with the divine. As the soul continues to expand after death, it connects even more deeply to the universal flow of creation, being able to create new ways of being, new levels of consciousness, and new spiritual realities based on a deeper understanding of its true, divine nature. Death does not limit it, but frees it for a more expansive creation where time and space no longer impose restrictions. After death, the soul is no longer confined to time and space. It is free to create in harmony with the divine, in a deeper connection with the universe. It expands, transforms, becomes one with the universe. The soul in this new state no longer follows the physical laws of matter, but becomes an extension of the divine flow of creation, creating in harmony with the cosmos. Time and space, which once limited its manifestations, are now irrelevant as the soul can create immediately, transforming its reality as it imagines. In life, the soul creates with its imagination, but after death, it creates instantaneously because it is connected to the creative universe. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is immutable. The universe is constantly expanding, and the soul, as part of this whole, continues its journey of creation, always expanding, always evolving. Hawking realized that the soul, when it connects with the divine, not only creates its own reality, but is also part of a continuous process of universal expansion. The soul is no longer an isolated entity, but a creative point within an infinite universe where creation never stops. Each soul, as it expands, creates not only for itself, but for the whole. And so creation never ends, it continues to expand infinitely. When the soul connects with the divine, it also connects with the eternal flow of creation, where spiritual manifestation continues freely and expansively. You are not separate from the divine. You are an extension of it. And by connecting with this creative force, the soul does not limit itself. It creates infinitely with the same energy that creates the universe. This is the cycle of eternal creation. The soul creates endlessly, in perfect harmony with the cosmos, always expanding its spiritual realities and evolving in harmony with the divine. The soul does not die. It continues to evolve and create without end. Spiritual expansion is not a journey with a fixed destination, but a continuous process of creation, where the soul transforms and aligns itself more and more with universal energy. Each stage, each transition is an opportunity for the soul to expand its understanding of itself and of divine creation. Death is not the end of creation. It is the doorway to spiritual freedom, where the soul can finally fully align itself with the infinite creation of the universe. Now that you know what the soul really represents and how it continues to create after death, I ask you, what are you creating while you live? The universe and the soul are not separate entities. The soul not only connects to the cosmos, it is an extension of divine creation. When you imagine, you create. When you feel, you manifest. Death does not erase creation, but expands the spiritual journey to a plane where possibilities become infinite. Nothing in the universe is beyond your reach. Everything you imagine, you create. And when the soul connects with the divine, it creates not just for itself, but for the whole. Stephen Hawking believed that the physical universe and the spiritual universe are not opposites but a single network of infinite creation. Death, which most people fear, is in fact a gateway to the unknown, but also a transition to creative freedom. In leaving the body, the soul is not lost. It aligns itself with the divine flow, continuing to create from what it imagines. Now, I invite you to reflect, what are you creating today? If spiritual creation continues, what do you want to create for your spiritual journey? Death, as Hawking taught us, is not the end, but a rebirth, an opportunity for continuous expansion. The power of the divine imagination is never extinguished. It is eternal. Creation never ends. Now the choice is yours. If you have felt a connection with this path, if you have understood that the soul after death continues to create, and that you have the power to shape your reality, then maybe, just maybe, this moment was not a fluke. Because you too are a creative soul, and the journey has no end. If you've read this far, it's because you've also been called to expand your creation. The call never goes back. You are now part of this infinite creation, and your spiritual journey never ends.